Chapter 25. The splendor of a brilliant twilight cast its subtle reflection upon the domed roof of Sargon's observatory, nestled on top of a rocky outcrop, layered in amongst an abundance of tropical wilderness.
"Watch your step,"
cautioned Sargon, as they climbed a wet stone stairway, lit up by tiny glowing flower buds.
"I've never seen glow-in-the-dark flowers before,"
muttered Basil, touching the petals of one of them.
A much-loved import from Myora.
Sargon replied.
There are some flowers that are nocturnally luminescent on planet Earth, yet, alas, are exceedingly rare, usually in jungles.
It was clear to both Basil and Maud just how much love and care had gone into developing this jagged sea apostle, transforming it into a lush utopia as they arrived at the foot of the observatory.
"Are you a gardener, Uncle?"
Basil wondered, watching Sargon weave through the beds of clambering tiger lily and gladiola, stepping up to another hefty wooden door.
"Well, it is within the blood of all Myorans to be a gardener."
Sargon glanced up, giving the big iron handle of the door a sturdy yank.
"We love beauty and believe in the importance of beautifying life. It nourishes the soul."
The door creaked wide open.
"Come in,"
he smiled, gesturing with his arm for Basil and Maud to enter. As they both stepped inside, they were quickly impressed with what they saw. An inviting circular room it was, lazily scattered with sofas upon delicate rugs, accompanying a spectacular mosaic-tiled dome ceiling. But the most jaw-dropping part of the observatory was what lay in the center, that 88-inch telescope, built onto a raised floor.
"Uncle!"
gasped Basil, staggering towards it inquisitively.
"I've never seen anything like this. I guess you look at the night sky with something like this." "More than the night sky, nephew,"
Sargon muttered, sitting down in the chair beside it, beginning to adjust some dials.
"One can see far, far away stars and galaxies, planets and nebulae with this beauty, to where no man on Earth has voyaged before." "Really?" "Indeed. I come here when I feel nostalgia for my cosmic home. Memories are wonderful, yes, but fleeting they are, and this telescope technology almost allows me to touch my aura, and I adore that."
Slightly distracted, Basil glanced through the foliage of the tropical lushness surrounding the observatory outside and noticed many people moving about with platters, furniture, and decor.
"So the feast is out here? In these gardens?"
Sargon looked up from the telescope eyepiece.
"Yes, son."
Maud suddenly had a thought of Sargon's daughters. He hoped very much that they would be at the feast. Sargon cleared his throat, a smirk forming across his lips as he continued to gaze through the eyepiece.
"Yes, Maud, my beloved daughters will be present at the feast." "Oh, God! I'm sorry!"
Maud sheepishly laughed out loud, holding his head in his hands, trying to conceal his embarrassment.
"I forgot you can read minds." "Yes, naturally I can.
Sargon chuckled.
Although I would never impinge on someone else's thoughts initially. It is an invasion of privacy, so to speak. But you know,"
he said, shooting Maud a fiercely protective glance.
"I love my daughters."
Basil gave Maud a condescending look.
"Control yourself,"
he scolded, whacking him on the arm.
"Why not go to the window and have a peek outside?"
Sargon suggested warmly, allowing him a moment to adjust the bearings on the telescope. uninterrupted.
Let me know if things are in order.
Basil and Maud both strolled toward the far eastern area and gasped at what they glimpsed outside. Before them was a lavish garden terrace, decorated amongst a sea of flowers, grapevines and assorted palms. Large flickering calcite lamps lit an elaborate stone dining table, seating 20 guests. Beyond that was a stairway, descending into another enormous terrace, perched on the very edge of the Apostle, yet this one was circular, rimmed with aged stone columns draped in jasmine vine. And not only this, but the staff, putting the final touches on the arrangements, appeared to be doing so in a very eloquent, synchronistic manner.
Are they dancing?
Basil muttered, utterly enchanted.
I don't know.
Maud whispered, gazing out helplessly.
When I get back to England, I'm going to learn how to garden.
Basil glanced at him.
Have you ever planted anything?
He mocked.
Oh, besides my foot up your bollocks?
Maud scoffed in response.
No. Good one.
Basil threw his head back in laughter.
What is so amusing?
Sargon called, his eye glued to the eyepiece.
Maud's inspired to start a garden when he returns to England.
Basil exclaimed as they shuffled back to Sargon.
Well, one has to begin somewhere.
Sargon enthused.
Uncle, I'm curious about that big circular terrace down on the edge of the cliff.
Basil wondered.
What is it?
Sargon pulled away from the eyepiece and glanced up at Basil.
You will see momentarily.
He then plastered his face back down on the eyepiece and focused. Suddenly, he gasped.
Ah, oh, splendid. Here it is, gentlemen.
He got up from the chair and ushered Basil to sit.
Come, son, take a gander.
As soon as Basil squashed his eye against the eyepiece, he noticed a deeply rich, luminescent planet with hues of indigo and pink dancing high above its surface. There were 2 planets vaguely in the background, and one of them had rings.
Oh, Uncle!
He cried, fascinated.
It's so beautiful! Where is this? You are glimpsing at our beloved Mayora.
Sargon grinned affectionately.
Home to your ancestors. Is she not just glorious? Yes.
Basil whispered, touched by her beauty hanging against the backdrop of a distant nebula. He sat for several minutes, lost in thought.
The slightly pale blue planet behind her is Veruk, and the one with rings is Zor, home to the guardians of our local planetary system. Mayora looks a lot like Earth. The water seems more turquoise than ours.
Basil studied carefully.
I feel such a sense of familiarity, like a longing I can't recognize. Makes me feel weird.
Sargon, who was now standing behind Basil, patted him tenderly on the shoulder. Closing his eyes as the memory of his home stirred his heart, Basil finally pulled away and let Maud take his place. Sharing a thoughtful glance, Sargon put an arm around Basil.
That is how the good people of the cosmos feel about Earth also. Hardly any soul breathing upon this planet knows of its true, explicit value. The universe itself, despite its incandescent beauty, is a hostile environment, and only sporadic places within it are suitable for life to evolve. But there's so many stars in the sky,
Basil whispered.
Oh, but there is so much life, dear nephew,
Sargon assured.
Creation is vast.
His gaze became lowly, staring into both of their faces.
And Earth is a genetic library, a magnificent one. The biodiversity, the minerals, the metals, and the genetics. It makes Earth very attractive to visitors.
His voice hushed to a whisper.
Even the Dark Ones.
Basil's mind immediately thought of the Zorn, and Sargon took note.
One must know that there is only light within creation. Only light.
Sargon murmured.
Yet how far one chooses to remove itself from the light is entirely individual. And of course, the further one moves away from the light, the darker it gets, until there is no light and only darkness. The Zorn are a dark race.
Sargon gazed into Basil's troubled eyes.
But the fable behind their beginnings is actually quite a sorrowful one. I would like to hear it, Uncle.
Basil answered, moving closer, the shadows of the dim study obscuring his face.
So would I,
added Maud, turning away from the telescope.
Well now, where do I begin?
Sargon inhaled deeply. He paused for a moment and sat down on the sofa, across from Maud, gathering his thoughts.
Long, long ago,
he began, patting the pillows for Basil to sit beside him.
Billions of years ago, there was a great one belonging to that of the Arisian race, known as Hadel. The divine realm, Isilon, is an expansive galaxy with more than 200 billion stars throughout, and the Arisian race was scattered far and wide. And although Hadel was not near the galactic center of Isilon, nor was he from the lineage of the Arisian order, on his planet, he was respected for his talents. He was known to be a master cosmophysicist, studying the energy of stars and all forms of matter within the universe. As legend has it, Hadel was fascinated with a particular star, Shah-Zoban, rumored to be a stargate in the Aorba galaxy, which many believe to be another entry point into the Balaam universe, God's universe.
But isn't the only entry point into the Balaam universe through the center of the Vorna's galaxy?
Basil furrowed a brow.
That is correct. But many believed otherwise, and for one to explore this so-called rumor was utterly forbidden. Shah-Zoban is an invisible star, and only those such as the High Lord Zavan or members of the Order of Izay knew the truth about it. To anyone else, it was simply out of bounds. Hadel was an incredibly gifted soul, capable of much more than his vocation, and his fascination for this Shah-Zoban stargate plagued him until he could no longer control his temptation. Under the self-assurance that he had accurately located Shah-Zoban, he managed to create a hole upon the star's surface. But alas, it was the wrong star, and the consequence of such aberrant actions yielded devastating results. Once Hadel had realized what he had done, it was too late.
Sargon shook his head.
The star discharged lethal amounts of energy, solar flares violently shooting out across the cosmos, immediately annihilating many stars and planets, causing a terrible chain reaction of draconian measure. More than 5,000 inhabited planets were wiped from existence within an instant, throwing the natural order of the cosmos into mayhem. This particular time in our galactic history is known as Dadava Onhoyoriola.
Basil lowered his gaze, giving Sargon curious eyes.
Which
translates to the day God closed his eyes.
Silence had befallen Sargon.
I am afraid my words fail to give sufficient explanation of the damage caused by Hadal.
Soon a flood of images of exploding planets and stars poured through Basil and Maud's minds.
Ah, I can see it!
Hissed Basil excitedly.
Me too!
Maud cried.
Oh God! Since the universe is woven within an intricate natural balance, the devastation of this event threw thousands of planetary and solar orbits off course. Other inhabited planets became planets of ice, others burned into their suns, or became barren. It was a cosmological catastrophe, and for the first time in galactic history, the Order of Izei summoned various commanders and leaders of various galactic confederations and cosmic sectors into the Isilon realm for crisis talks. They made their one and only open request for the omnipotent power of Va to assist.
You mean God?
Basil wondered.
Yes. Unbeknownst to them all, their request was received, and a supreme emissary hailing from the Baleahem universe made a visit to Lord Zavin. Nobody to this day knows of what took place between the two, but afterward, order was slowly and delicately restored within the cosmos. It took a galactic age to undo the careless actions that took only a few seconds to create. And this supreme emissary's visit is our only evidence that a hierarchical order is in place, and that the Baleahem universe really does exist.
Basil and Maud sat stunned.
So what of Hadal?
Basil asked finally.
Hadal
Sargon began.
had violated the Universal Code, a set of universal laws governing every highly evolved race. His actions were deemed irrevocable by the Order of Izei, and therefore he would pay the ultimate price. His Arisian genetics were stripped from his soul, and he was banished from the Isilon realm forever. Wow.
Maud muttered, staring out in front of him.
And went to where? To Zornon,
Sighed Sargon, wiping a lock of hair from his face.
a barren and cold planet in this Milky Way galaxy. A planet 4 times the size of Earth in the Draco constellation, far, far away from Isilon, billions of light years.
So he could still live without his Arisian genetics?
Basil wondered.
Yes, of course. He simply lost his knowledge,
Sargon stated.
his abilities, his expanded awareness. He lost everything, becoming a denser being, more akin to man. Flung back down the evolutionary ladder. You must remember, he was from the most advanced race known to us, and still, even under these dire circumstances, he not only survived, but thrived, achieving great feats. He indeed was talented and resilient, and using his cosmic ingenuity, coupled with his accumulating spite for the Arisian race, he managed to create a soulless, biosynthetic being, which became the blueprint for the Zorn race, sympathetic only to him and his rule.
So, he's still alive?
Asked Basil anxiously.
Like, I mean now? After all these years?
Very much alive and well, my son.
Sargon assured cautiously.
He has created a force. The planet Zornon is a cold and barren planet, yes. But it is also rich in gold. Hadel learned how to prolong his life by the consuming of gold. How?
Maud frowned.
A very strange process happens if one ingests gold.
Sargon smirked.
If you live through the initial stage of gold poisoning, which is a consequence after consuming it, the atomic structure of the physical body will undergo a metamorphosis, resulting in the cells within the body becoming in an artificial state of constant regeneration. Which means...
Basil rolled his hands out in front of him.
Which means physical immortality. Yet living in this state does not go without its side effects. Hadel's long silver hair, teeth and nails fell out. His skin changed from white to a burnt golden color, and his eyes and mouth became as black as the ocean out there.
Sargon murmured, pointing to the dark horizon.
God, he sounds ghastly.
Maud added.
You do not ever want to see him.
Sargon closed his eyes and shook his head softly.
For he will make sure that you never forget him. He has no regard for the natural order. Completely self-serving, he sucks the throb of life out of the cosmos. From creation. The battle with Hadel has surpassed countless galactic epochs. He has formed allegiances, alliances far and wide. He is so powerful, he has even yet to be found. Oh, he sounds awful,
Basil muttered.
Make no mistake, his one objective is clear. To find souls that share the rare Arisian blood of High Lord Zarvan. He believes that possessing this blood, he could splice it and derive all the power and the knowledge from it to conquer Azalon, Lord Zarvan, and ultimately the universe.
Basil and Maud stared hard into Sargon's withdrawn face.
Hadel has had billions of years to refine and flex his power.
Sargon continued.
There is much darkness in the universe, but he is the darkest we know of. It all began with him. Naturally, darkness has always existed throughout, and has been thwarted in isolated instances, for example, by local galactic groups. But Hadel was the first to influence on a universal scale. Well, can't anyone destroy him?
Questioned Maud. Sargon looked dubiously.
They have to find him first. There are many factions under him that dilute his whereabouts. Do you know what he looks like?
Wondered Basil.
I know what he looks like,
said Sargon.
Telepathic images of him have been shown throughout the cosmic ages. Oh, I wouldn't want to see him.
Maud shook his head quickly.
Believe me, you wouldn't want to.
Sargon concluded coldly.
We are regarded as worthless dross to him. He has enslaved countless worlds, innumerable innocent species, and he is yet to get what he is looking for. So, why hasn't he found it by now?
Wondered Basil. Sargon raised his eyebrows.
Do you remember what I told you?
He eyed Basil.
The genetic information he is searching for, your genetic information, is one. Just one in 200 trillion. That's a huge number.
Maud gasped.
A crazy number. I couldn't even imagine people existing outside of our planet up until yesterday. Life is abundant within the multiverse, but it is not all good.
Stabbing fear pierced Basil's stomach, as if he were a worm dangling from a hook. He and Maud exchanged glances, and they all sat in a sobering silence, pondering for a few moments. Sargon glanced outside, watching the many staff happily putting final touches on the terrace for the feast.
In light of this formidable darkness,
Sargon drew his attention back to Basil Amord.
many galactic confederations have been united under the auspices of counteracting Hadal, to purge of him and his darkness from creation, once and for all. His various alliances have too been formed for millions of years, and are too a force to be reckoned with. The Mayoran civilization is a member of several of these positive confederations, and is in good standing with many others, and has been for a very long time.
But where on earth? Not Mayora.
Interjected Basil.
That is indeed correct, son.
Sargon murmured quietly.
The heaviness in Sargon's face was clear.
Well, aren't we protected here?
Basil asked anxiously.
Well, to put it quite bluntly, not really.
Sargon glanced at him eagerly.
The High Council of Saturn, the governing body of this solar system, is no match for the Zorn at most, let alone Hadal.
So that means anyone can come here?
Concluded Basil, lost in his own thoughts.
Not anyone. Some they can counteract, but those of extreme technological advancement do come.
Basil finished Sargon's sentence. Sargon noticed Basil staring at the large lens of the telescope, withdrawn in his own troubling thoughts.
Your protection, however,
He voiced, veering his head into Basil's line of sight, interrupting troubling thoughts.
is the Erunasis Medallion, so long as it is always around your neck.
Basil stared at his uncle's face hard.
But if it accidentally comes off,
You do not ever want to do that.
Sargon gravely butted in, glancing sharply at Basil.
You do not even want to think that.
Basil peered down at his chest.
so how was I protected before I found this medallion?
When you put the Erunasis Medallion around your neck for the first time, what do you remember?
Basil thought back, and his mind drifted to the petrified altar within that underground chamber in the study.
The flames?
His eyes glazed over, remembering.
The flames shot up in front of me for an instant.
And it was that precise moment
Sargon explained.
that you became activated.
Activated?
Basil stared into Sargon's dark eyes.
It was the moment that both you and the medallion became unified, put on the cosmic map, so to speak.
Sargon advised quietly.
Many, many noteworthy star people were informed that the Erunasis Medallion had once again finally coalesced with its keeper. It was a very poignant moment.
Basil rubbed his chin.
The Erunasis Medallion, in all its wondrous ways, has a way of keeping you invisible, totally and utterly. But before this ultimate unification, your energy signature was like a fire in the dark. It stood out more than most, and thus, the orb blurred your energy from that Zorn entity.
Sargon said carefully.
Do you remember it? The one dancing about in your study.
The orb? The orb?
Basil smirked.
I remember you saying something about it last night. So that was my protection.
Sure.
Sargon grinned.
It was a fragmented slice of energy of someone you will meet tonight.
Basil's memory flashed him back to the night he first spotted the iridescent orb. He was ever eager to meet whom this energy belonged to.
I'm so curious about it now, Uncle.
You can now obviously appreciate just how anticipated your coming of age has been up until this very moment.
Sargon stepped closer and stared at Basil with a glaring intensity that was harrowing. It was even felt by Maud, who quickly stood up behind Basil.
I will repeat myself once more.
Sargon muttered gravely.
You must never remove the Erunasis Medallion from your neck. Not ever.
The gravity of Sargon's words hit Basil hard in the chest.
I heed your dire warning, Uncle.
He nodded assuredly.
I will do exactly what you say.
Ah, come on, let us not spoil the mood with this darkness any longer.
Sargon sighed with a soft smile, touching Basil's shoulder with a reassuring hand.
Come, let us admire the flame nebula,
He suggested, a much more jovial tone in his voice. He sat down beside the telescope and once more squashed his face onto the eyepiece, adjusting the dials and gadgets with his fingers. Turning the dial slowly, his whole body abruptly flinched, and he quickly sat back in the chair.
Uncle!
Basil asked worriedly, his hand on Sargon's robust shoulder.
Are you okay?
They are here.
Sargon murmured, his eyes glinting with delight, gazing through the glass of the observatory.